The UCLA men's basketball season's in full swing, and we need you to get to Pauley Pavilion to support the Bruins. Don't miss a single chance to see this year's exciting team, led by Donovan Dent, Eric Daly Jr., Sky Clark, and Tyler Bilodeau. Pauley Pavilion, presented by Westcon Financials, the home of the greatest tradition in all of college basketball. We can't wait to have you join us as the Bruins continue to build on that legacy. With big-time matchups, go to UCLABruins.com/tickets to secure your seats today before it's too late. Let's get Pauley rocking.
Good afternoon. Getting right down to business here. We're doing it live, doing more at 4, weekday afternoons, right after the Guy Benson Show at 3, and just before Randy Wang and the 790 KBC News Blitz. You got Motec on Money, live on the air here in 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com, and the on-demand Motec on Money podcast, KBC.com, Apple iTunes, YouTube, all of your favorite podcast platforms, and I'll be back on at 6 o'clock this evening, by the way, for the Way Home radio show and podcast presented by the Union Rescue Mission. Every Thursday evening at 6, I'm on the air with the CEO of the Union Rescue Mission, Mark Hood. So stay tuned at 6 o'clock this evening for the Way Home radio show and podcast right here on 790 KBC. Rough day for the stock market today, with investors finding few places to hide. Pretty much a rough day for Bitcoin again today. Looks like gold is below 5,000. Silver also taking a hit, and the Dow tumbled nearly 700 points at the closing bell at 49,452. The S&P 500 down 109 at 6833, and the Nasdaq tumbling nearly 500 points at 22,597. The volatility index today spiking 18%. The yield on the 10-year note now at 4.10%. After 8 consecutive days of losses, shares of Amazon now in bear market territory, meaning they're off 20% or more from their recent high. Amazon stock closing below $200 a share today, about 21.5% below its most recent high. We see NVIDIA taking a hit today, down more than 3 at 186 and change. Microsoft down more than 2 at 401 and change. Oracle down 68 cents at 156.48. The price of oil easing a bit today after President Trump announced that the U.S. has to make a deal with Iran and thinks a deal could be struck over the next month. In the president's words, we have a deal. We have to make a deal. We have to make a deal, he said. Otherwise, it's going to be very traumatic. This after the Wall Street Journal reported tensions are high, and despite talks last week in Oman, both sides remain at an impasse between the U.S. and Iran, with the president's pressure on the Iranian regime escalating after that brutal crackdown, the deadly crackdown on anti-government protesters across Iran last month. I'll discuss the very latest with Middle East expert Dan Raviv, former network news correspondent and author of numerous books, including his latest, Target Iran and Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. He also hosts the Mossad Files podcast. Dan Raviv will be joining us live later this hour. Big news on the commercial real estate scene here in the Los Angeles area, with thousands of apartments set to take over empty office buildings. Part of a new L.A. ordinance. Some news about changes at the so-called graffiti towers, also in downtown Los Angeles. The bankrupt and unfinished billion-dollar construction site of condo towers in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, right across the street from the L.A. Live Complex and Crypto.com Arena. Some news about that coming up as well. From Jerry Sullivan, National Managing Editor, The Real Deal, the authoritative commercial real estate news source. Looks like Bitcoin hovering at around 66,000 here at the moment. Ethereum below 2,000, and Doge at the moment at 9 cents. Joining us live now is John Najarian. Dr. J, as he's known on the major financial networks, co-founder of Market Rebellion. His books with his brother Pete include It's Not an Option, Learning How to Trade Options is No Longer an Option, It's a Necessity. He's got the laser eyes on, too, watching the cryptos since cryptos began. John Najarian, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
It's always good to be on with you, Frank, but I can understand there's probably some nervousness out in the audience this evening, and I don't blame them.
Let's get to the exciting stuff first. Cryptos, Bitcoin was above 126,000 last year, and now it's hovering again close to 60,000, a haircut of about 50% here. What's your reaction to the action here, price action on Bitcoin, and for that matter, all the cryptos taking a hit?
Well, as you say, it's been a rough ride since that 126,000 high was hit in October or so of last year. And just this year, and not even 2 months old, a month and a half old, we're down 26%. It began the year at about 90,000 Bitcoin, that is, and then trades today to 66,390 as I'm looking at it right now. I think there are a host of reasons for it. Obviously, there's been a risk-off in the markets, even in some of the best-performing metals that usually would be what investors scramble for in times of volatility like this. But Bitcoin is one of the thesis behind Bitcoin being so much of a basically not a currency, but a safe harbor and perhaps one in limited supply, a maximum of 21 million coins and so forth. But the problem is that there's a whole bunch of futures and perpetual futures that are pretty much extending the Bitcoin beyond 21 million. Obviously, not all the Bitcoins have been mined so far. We're into the 18 million of them have been mined. But instead of having that, again, assets gather their value by their scarcity that we talk about so much, you and I, Frank, instead, there are so many different ways that they're manipulating the supply of Bitcoins, even though they're really like in the ether. I mean, again, a perpetual future that is not backed by Bitcoin, that is traded around the world 24/7, has extended well beyond 21, probably 24 million coins, the amount of Bitcoin essentially that is out there. And then I'd say it's also a lot of newbies, a lot of people that got into it late, probably paid more or less between here and 110,000 for the coins, Bitcoin again. And I think they thought it was wonderful when it's going up. We all think that. But when it's coming down, I think they're some of the ones that are hitting the sell, sell, sell button, as Jim Cramer would say, pretty hard. And it certainly seems like it wants to test 60 again, even though it's only $6,000 away. It's moving at a pretty good clip and not sustaining many of the rallies that it has.
And people are taking another look at Bitcoin and the narrative around it. Of course, a lot of people considered it digital gold and a safe haven, as you mentioned, and a hedge against the dollar and all these other things. But now people are talking, is it going to, or asking, is it going to go to zero? How much lower do you think it's going to go?
I don't think it's going to go to zero. And I do still see a very good future for it. But again, the traditional investing world would say, well, instead of digital gold, just buy gold. And many people did. And of course, it began the year at, I think it was about 4,400. It exploded up to almost 6,000 to the ounce in the feeding frenzy that was there. And as we've come off now, gold has traded to the downside rather hard, of course. You mentioned it broke 5,000, and it's at 4,900 right now. Silver was 71 at the beginning of the year and traded to 121 per ounce. It's right now at about 75. So those two asset classes, even though they've been volatile, have worked rather than being in the market. But Bitcoin has not. And like I say, I think there's a host of reasons for why Bitcoin has not, but they still haven't been able to break the back of the gold bugs or the silver folks because they really believe and have scrambled into silver in particular as an industrial metal.
Where do you think Bitcoin goes from here?
I think, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see it test 60 again, which it did just over a week ago. But I think that presents a pretty attractive level in my way of thinking. I know Tom Lee and a whole bunch of the folks that are following Bitcoin and Ethereum in particular, because I believe Tom's company, Bitmine Immersion Tech, I think it is, yep. BMNR, is the largest holder of Ethereum in the world. But I think that a lot of them are probably ratcheting back what they think the upside will be this year unless something more dramatic happens. I mean, we have been waiting for a lot of the legislation that came through to actually be something that's even more real when they pass these various bills. But many of them have been stuck and not gotten through in some respects because of government shutdown, and in others just because Congress has kind of been all over the place this year, much like the market.
Right. Certainly big fans of crypto in Congress, as well as harsh critics, and that's pretty much the case across the board. And we certainly talk to big fans as well as harsh critics of crypto here on this program as well. Now, one big fan, of course, is Michael Saylor with his strategy company, formerly MicroStrategy, right? And he's committed to buying that dip recently, and that stock down to around 123 here at the moment, off its high of 457. He's making statements. He's committed to holding and buying more. And BitMine Immersion, you mentioned, Tom Lee's company, which is focused on Ethereum, is, let's see here, just below $20 a share now. Would you be touching any of those names in all this?
I would. And I think BitMine Immersion, Tom Lee's company, and that's essentially just an Ethereum holder. I think that's a great play, especially with the move Ethereum has made to the downside. Strategy is always going to be one of those, you and I know it, that is going to have rumors spread on Reddit or on various discords that, oh my gosh, he's over-levered to this point and he's going to have to liquidate and so forth. I don't think that's the case with Michael Saylor and Strategy, but it has been a rough ride. Again, I think in the first week of the year, or maybe the second week, it was a $180 stock, and you just mentioned it's 123 now. That's a pretty ugly drop, and I think that's because they can spread those rumors so quickly about the fiscal strength of Michael Saylor and of Strategy. So I would think that there's probably a lot of not just Joes and Janes, but institutions that are in many of those top names: Solana, Ethereum, Bitcoin, of course, perhaps even Binance now. And I think many of the folks that are in there late to the party are probably the ones that continue to pressure these on days like today.
You, of course, speak at a lot of these crypto conferences. Any of the coins or anything at the conferences catching a buzz, and what might be the next catalyst to turn this thing around?
Well, I have not heard that. I haven't heard what the next catalyst would be. Certainly, the Genius Act and some of the acts that are already through Congress are great, but there are still a couple that have not made it all the way through. And I think that's why, again, that there's pressure on virtually all these digital assets, and as many as, 200 perhaps different DATs, those digital asset treasuries that are out there. I think they also tend to put some pressure on, because many of those borrow against their holdings to buy more, and that works until you don't have enough money to meet the margin. And then there's more liquidation of those rather than the, as you said, Michael Saylor trying to jump in and buy the dip. So I'm right now, if I were longer in the critical digital asset space, I would be looking for a level somewhere between 58 and 62,000 for the next support. But boy, we've got a lot of stocks that are making moves that just outshine, if you will, the bearish move in Bitcoin. I mean, AppLovin, this great advertising and monetization platform, it was just getting killed today. It was down 19%. And I could point to a whole bunch of those, including a lot of the logistics companies today, Frank, that were seeing steady AI-related pressure, because it seems to be the magic bullet now for the bears. that they can fire that at anything. And today it was firing at a lot of the logistics companies like Expediators International, EXPD. That's a freight forward company and logistics, down 14%. C.H. Robinson, obviously freight brokerage, the big trucks that run across the country, down 14%. It was just amazing how many of those stocks in the logistics space were just taking hits that most of us would not have thought that AI would have been a catalyst for them to get hit. But it was, and it has been.
You wrote the book, It's Not an Option, How to Trade Options, and no longer an option, it's a necessity. And we saw the VIX index, by the way, spike 18% today. Where are you placing your bets as far as options are concerned nowadays? And what are your thoughts here on the VIX and some of these other instruments?
Well, the VIX certainly did pop, and yet it couldn't hold. It was up around $21 or $21.20, I think, or so today, which would have been, I think you already cited it, something like an 18% upside move, something like that. Right. I will be surprised if it can sustain that. We all know we've got President's Day coming up, and there'll be a lot of decay in options over the weekend because we won't trade on Monday anywhere because of the holiday. So I think we'll likely, and I'm of course referring to the United States, but I think the volatility index is more likely to trade to the downside next week, and perhaps even if they get any kind of a bounce tomorrow, get right back down below 20 again. It hit a high today of 23.10, I believe, was the high today, but or something like that. But anyway, it's trading $20.82, and I think people will be more sellers at that level than buyers because they're not really looking at 1.5% moves a day, even though we've had a pretty rough week.
Yeah. So the Dow had been hitting record highs for 3 days in a row up until this week, and now it's cracked back below 50,000 here, down to 669 today to 49,452. The Nasdaq taking a tumble down 469 at 22,597. The Dow has been outshining the Nasdaq lately. What are your thoughts about Nvidia and the Mag 7 names at this point, and look at Amazon in bear market territory now as well?
Yeah, and that one was a head scratcher for me. Amazon, of course, has so many different levers that they do pull. They have sellers that they take a fee for the sellers that sell through their website. They have, of course, their own product that they can sell. And then they have the AWS side of their business. And I think many of us saw that the holiday sales this year were fairly flat. It was, as it always is, selective. Not everybody had a flat year-on-year Christmas, but an awful lot of retailers did. And Amazon, the biggest retailer on earth, was one of those victims. And I think people were looking for more, perhaps more positive guidance going forward from Amazon that they didn't get. And that stock has been heavy under pressure. And then, of course, all of the SaaS or software as a service stocks like ServiceNow, symbol NOW, just hit hard. Salesforce, CRM, hit very hard as well. And I tend to agree with some of the analysts that have been saying it's seeming like it's overdone at this point, hitting all those software stocks as if nobody's ever going to need a software or a programmer again just because they've got Cade. I think that's probably a little optimistic to think that optimistic in terms of how much they think they can do with just an AI app rather than actual programmers. I think there will still be both, but I obviously recognize that AI does have that disruptive power, and right now it's certainly on display.
Any specific places, John Najarian, where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, I would say energy, again, with all forms of it, from uranium to fossil fuels, because depending what happens with the president and Iran with these negotiations, we can keep pushing crude oil prices higher. That would not be good. So I'd say keep an eye on that. We've certainly seen a lot of activity in ExxonMobil, for instance.
What about that? Probably seen it on social media, and maybe you can clear this up for us. Does it cost more to mine a Bitcoin now than it is at the current price? What does it take to mine a Bitcoin, and is that something that you're keeping an eye on?
I think it makes sense to keep an eye on it, but most of the miners have located to areas where they have essentially great power supply at a very reasonable price. They are not in places like where I am in Puerto Rico, because we have some of the highest energy prices outside of California, I think, which I believe still California and Hawaii hold that honor, if you will. I would think that they can still make money at 65 or 66,000, but those that were on the edge, as it came down from 100,000 to 80 to now 66, were probably not in the right place to do that business anyway. And there's an awful lot of opportunities in that, because I hear a lot of companies going to where, for instance, oil and gas wells are, and instead of flaring off that excess natural gas, they are using it to power data centers and so forth.
Yep.
And I think if somebody's not making money at 66,000, they're going to quickly switch over to become a data center rather than a Bitcoin miner, and you're seeing that happen in spades.
All right. Well, John, we hope to see you out here in California as soon as possible so you can experience our high gas prices. I think we're probably more than Hawaii, Puerto Rico, any place. John Najarian, thank you very much for taking the call live with us here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank. Always a pleasure, sir.
Yes, sir.
What would you do if your online store converted 36% more shoppers? You could take 36% more vacation.
Another pina colada?
Yes, please.
Open a new retail location with 36% more square feet.
Fantastic.
Hire 36% more help.
You're hired and you're hired.
Shopify has the world's best converting checkout, up to 36% better than other e-commerce platforms. What you do with those extra sales is up to you. Switch to Shopify today at shopify.com/listen and get a $1 trial. Shopify.com/listen.
Most people don't realize how much of their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions pulling details about you from public records and the internet, then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might just sell credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it together at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/secure. Protect yourself now at aura.com/secure.
The UCLA women's basketball season is one you don't want to miss. Your top 10 Bruins are well on their way to another Final Four run. We need you to get to Pauley to support this incredible team. Led by Lauren Betts, Gabriella Jaquez, and Kiki Rice, newcomers Gianna Neepkins and Charlize Ledger-Walker. This group plays an exciting brand of basketball and wins. The time is now to come to see these stars in action. Big-time matchups are coming. Go to UCLABruins.com/tickets to secure your seats today. Can't wait to see you in Westwood cheering on the Bruins.
Motac on Money continues, 790 KABC. We have a loser on Wall Street today. The Dow down 669, back below 50K at 49,452. S&P 500 down 109, and the NASDAQ down 469. The yield in the 10-year note now to 4.10%. Gold at 4,943 and change. Oil at 62.82. Bitcoin hovering at around 66,180. Moteka Money continues, 790 KABC. See the price of oil easing a bit today. Among the reasons, President Trump saying today that the U.S. has to make a deal with Iran and thinks a deal could be struck over the next month. The president told reporters today, we have to make a deal, in his words, otherwise it's going to be very traumatic, very traumatic. This after the Wall Street Journal noted tensions are running high in the Middle East, and despite talks last week in Oman, both sides remained at an impasse. President Trump's pressure on Iran escalated after the brutal crackdown on anti-government protesters in Iran last month. Let's bring in Middle East expert Jan Raviv now, former network news correspondent, author of numerous books, including his latest, Target Iran and Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. He also hosts the Mossad Files podcast. We did see the Israeli Prime Minister meet with President Trump at the White House this week. A lot to talk about here. Dan Raviv, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Happy to be with you, Frank. Hi.
Take it from the top here and what's coming across your desk as the latest news as we follow what's happening there in the Middle East.
Well, all of us Middle East watchers were wondering what would be the outcome of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to the White House. It was the seventh time he has seen Donald Trump since Trump returned to the presidency last year. 7 visits. I mean, that's more than any other foreign leader. And the result this past June was that Israel and Iran went to war for 12 days. And at the very end, the U.S. joined in with President Trump ordering attacks on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. So that was last June. And now President Trump has indicated for several reasons that the U.S. may strike Iran again. One reason would be to help the protesters who courageously went out and called for an end of the Ayatollah's regime, and President Trump promised to help them. As we know, thousands of them were shot dead. But another reason is intelligence that the Iranians are building up their ballistic missile forces and may be thinking of getting back to uranium enrichment. So the president seems to be mostly focused on uranium, and Prime Minister Netanyahu went to Washington to say, hey, there's so much else. The missiles, Iran helping terrorist groups. And at the end, based on their statements, and by the way, they did not appear together before cameras, based on their statements, I would say there was a disagreement. President Trump decided to continue with the negotiations, and Netanyahu is headed home to Israel saying, well, maybe the negotiations have a chance, but I don't think so, which means in a short while there could be an attack on Iran, though as you reported, President Trump said that he would give the talks about a month.
On there live with Middle East expert Dan Raviv, and what's your assessment of these talks? Are we getting any reliable reports about what's happening, what's going on? I guess the Iranian leadership gets in front of the cameras and microphones once in a while as the brutal crackdown there continues, and horrific reports of people being killed in hospital beds. I don't know if you saw that one, Dan Raviv, and other ongoing horrific atrocities there.
Yeah, it's a very brutal regime toward the people who dare to be opponents, who have the courage. But when it comes to foreign affairs, Iran acts like they're a normal country. Their foreign minister, Mr. Arakchi, has been traveling since his sit-down with President Trump's negotiator, Steve Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, those talks in the Arab country of Oman. More talks are expected. But in the meantime, Arakchi, the Iranian minister, he's been going to other countries, mostly Arab countries, and saying that Iran is perfectly willing to have limitations on uranium enrichment because they don't want to build a nuclear bomb. Intelligence agencies don't believe that, of course, but I think they're playing for time. They're willing to have more negotiations. And so far from the White House, President Trump is willing to give it a chance. It seems to me he doesn't want to attack Iran again, and I'll tell you why I think that's true. I think he would like to knock out the Islamic regime in Iran, but he's probably been advised that that would be no simple task and might require a long war, and President Trump does not want that.
On the air live with Dan Raviv. It's hard to believe, Dan Raviv, when you wrote the book, Every Spy a Prince, it was around the time of the first Persian Gulf War, and we were on the air together back then talking about the military buildup, and what we're seeing now reportedly is the largest military buildup of U.S. forces since the the Persian Gulf War with these not only the aircraft carrier strike group, but also additional military assets being sent there. What's your assessment of that and the U.S. Military capabilities at this point?
Well, I'm glad you brought it up because we're both old enough, yes, even you, Frank, to be well aware and having worked on the story in 2003 when the U.S. Invaded Iraq to get rid of Saddam Hussein's regime. Now, is there a chance that President Trump will order a similar invasion of Iran to get rid of the Ayatollah's regime? I would say no, in part because it's an election year. I don't think the American people want it. President Trump is proud, he says, to have solved wars, not started wars. So I think the direction things are going is very different. He's moved one aircraft carrier and strike force. He's moving a second one to put pressure on Iran, but also, to be frank, to help defend Israel, because if Iran is attacked, it probably will try to retaliate against U.S. forces in the Middle East and against Israel, and the U.S. would help shoot down all the incomings. I really don't know what will happen in the next month or so, and so the area will continue to be tense, but I know you like watching the price of oil, which has a lot more factors than just the Persian Gulf, of course, but for now it's more relaxed if there really are negotiations. And for now, that's what we have.
Thank you for that assessment. We're speaking live to Middle East expert Dan Raviv. And what's going on in Gaza? Apparently there were some violations there, and Israeli forces took action. Give us an update on what's happening there.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to determine or have an opinion as to who's right and who's wrong. Hamas, clearly a terrorist group. The massacres, the kidnappings of October 7th in 2023. But now Hamas is small, controlling a small part of the Gaza Strip. The Israelis have troops there. President Trump is determined to move to the next part of his peace plan. Indonesia has reportedly offered to send more than 7,000 troops on a humanitarian mission to Gaza to help keep the peace. President Trump must be delighted. Indonesia is an important and large Muslim country. But what will get the Israelis to pull back? What might get Hamas to give up its weapons, which is part of the Trump plan? We're still on the edge there. Next week in Washington, the new Board of Peace, created by President Trump, committed to moving ahead to arrange the reconstruction of Gaza, will have its first serious meeting. Washington next week. They'll try to raise money, get pledges from the rich Arab countries especially. That'll be the next test when it comes to Gaza.
I don't know if you saw the latest report. I don't have too much detail on this, but there's one report that says President Trump will announce a multi-billion-dollar Gaza reconstruction and stabilization force sometime next week, February 19th, according to one report. What are we to know about that?
Yeah, that would be the kind of fund that anyone involved in Trump's Board of Peace is envisioning. You need money if you're going to dream of rebuilding the Gaza Strip and providing housing, let alone food and medicine to the people there. So I don't expect much of that to be U.S. government money. President Trump has excelled at getting other countries to put up the money, and I think he's depending on the rich Arab countries. They might come through, and we would know next week in Washington, the Board of Peace meeting.
Certainly, it's we've been saying this for weeks now. Any minute now, something big could happen. What's the situation in Israel in anticipation of a possible strike on Iran?
Okay, defensive measures just in case Israel is the target of retaliation. So the defensive measures are strong. Of course, Israel's Air Force is ready to attack Iran, as it did last June, dominating the skies, easily knocking out Iran's anti-aircraft systems. It could get messy. It could get ugly, of course, but there's also the political story there. In the U.S., we have our midterms coming up. Well, in Israel, there must be an election by the end of October. Netanyahu's term is running out. He could call an early election, but either way, an election this year. Netanyahu wants to look like a winner, the man who will claim that he beat Hezbollah in Lebanon, that he defeated Iran, that he defeated Hamas after the atrocities of 2023. So politics come together now with some of these major international decisions.
And what about the next potential leader of Iran, if in fact the current regime is overthrown?
if it's overthrown. I know many times when you and I have spoken here on KABC, there have been people who have some hopes that Reza Pahlavi, the so-called baby Shah, son of the last monarch, the Shah of Iran, has a chance. He thinks so. And a lot of the Iranian broadcast stations, I mean the unofficial ones, the ones of the exiled Iranians based in Los Angeles and London and elsewhere, a lot of them would like Reza Pahlavi. But, even President Trump has said, I don't think the late Shah's son has that kind of public support. And as a result, we can see it. President Trump has not given Reza Pahlavi a one-on-one meeting. So we don't know. It could be another case like Venezuela where President Trump could be more comfortable working with a weakened Iran with a nuclear agreement compared with the chaos that could be caused by a government being toppled.
Very interesting. Thank you very much for that very thoughtful assessment as always. That is veteran broadcast journalist, Middle East expert Dan Raviv, former network news correspondent, author of numerous books, including his latest, Target Iran, Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. You can also listen to Dan Raviv's excellent podcast, The Mossad Files. Dan Raviv, thank you very much for taking the call live with us here this afternoon.
Always a pleasure, Frank.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions pulling details about you from public records and the internet, then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. All backed by 24/7 U.S.-based fraud support. Other companies might just sell credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it together at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/secure. Protect yourself now at aura.com/secure.
The UCLA women's basketball season is one you don't want to miss. Your top 10 Bruins are well on their way to another Final Four run. We need you to get to Pauley to support this incredible team. Led by Lauren Betts, Gabriella Jaquez, and Kiki Rice, newcomers Gianna Neepkins and Charlize Ledger-Walker. This group plays an exciting brand of basketball and wins. The time is now to come to see these stars in action. Big-time matchups are coming. Go to UCLABruins.com/tickets to secure your seats today. Can't wait to see you in Westwood cheering on the Bruins.
The CJ Pearson Show.
Every week, we'll take on the biggest cultural, political, and moral battles in America head on.
CJ presents the most passionate voices in the Black community.
When you're going around and talking to people in actual communities, you get to know what people actually care about.
As a Black man, why can't I be the first one in my family to graduate from college? Why can't it be me? Shift the way that I think about the world.
Bold truth, real conviction, zero permission. This is the CJ Pearson Show.
The CJ Pearson Show. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Thank you very much. Motega Money continues here in 790 KABC. Big news on the commercial real estate scene here in the Los Angeles area with thousands of apartments set to take over empty office buildings as part of a new LA ordinance. Let's bring in Jerry Sullivan now, who is the managing editor, national managing editor of The Real Deal, the authoritative commercial real estate news source at therealdeal.com. Jerry, thank you very much for taking the call on that big story, and certainly a lot to talk about here this afternoon.
Certainly, Frank. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, take it from the top. What do we need to know about this? There's been a lot of talk with all the office space that's vacant in the Los Angeles area, especially downtown and even in the San Fernando Valley, to maybe convert some of this to some sort of housing. What's the latest on that front?
Well, and I'd be careful about this particular story as it rolls out. There's a lot to like there, loosening regulations on conversions. A lot of it seems fairly common sense. I would mention 2 points of caution. First is it's an expansion of the law that expanded the possibilities downtown around the year 2000, which led to the downtown renaissance and conversions of old office buildings, particularly the old Bank District was sort of the ground zero for it. And then that sparked new construction, and you saw residential influx downtown. That's all fine and good. That was very old buildings that had no parking. And one of the key things was that the ordinance relieved developers of a stringent requirement on parking, like two parking spots for every unit, that sort of thing. So they were converting these very old buildings that didn't really have parking, and they were relieved of that. This one applies to newer buildings, and my guess is they all have parking anyway. So I'm not so sure it's that, that was a key thing that made a big difference. I'm not so sure that makes that much of a difference. And the other thing is just a general caution, the whole notion of, and it makes perfect sense. We have a housing shortage and high vacancy rates in office. So why not convert office to housing and solve both problems? It's just not quite as easily done as said. And there's some factors that go into this. Not every building is, pencils out. And so I think this is a case of regard it with cautious optimism going forward.
All right. What about graffiti towers? That's the big unfinished, bankrupt Chinese construction project in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. I know you and your team have been reporting some big news about that. What do we need to know about that tremendous eyesore in the heart of downtown Los Angeles?
Yes, and we have an interesting turn to chat with you about today, Frank. Our Elena Boltros just did a story about there's been a legal case among the creditors in the bankruptcy. And so there's been a settlement on that. And so two of them have emerged as possible bidders where they could take what they're owed. One is Lend-Lease, which is a very big construction company. And the other is, I think, called LA Downtown Investment. And that was a group of EB5 investors. And that's the invest to put money in and get a visa deal that the federal government had. So those two parties have settled between them their dispute. And it would appear that between the two of them, they might make a credit bid, meaning we'll bid for this property what we're owed. So the two of them together are owed about $400 million. If that were to win, that would be the value of that property. Interesting because there's already more than $1 billion into it, and the estimates have been that at least another $1 billion will be needed to finish it. So whether these two parties want to do a credit bid or maybe just take possession and try and sell it, I don't know. But a credit bid and them taking possession might be at least a signal of a step forward.
Given the unfinished state of that enormous construction project and the fact that it's been sitting out in the open, unfinished for years now, is there talk about possibly tearing the whole thing down and starting with something else?
I've not heard talk about specific considerations of that. I got to believe that would be, not only expensive in general terms, and I know that you go by there regularly, and so you're aware of this. The logistics of that could get very difficult. That is insinuated right in the landscape in a way that might make it, harder than normal to tear down. I don't know if they could do the detonation, which, a well-done detonation might get that done, but I'm not sure. And the cost on that, I don't know that anybody's really pegged that yet either. I will tell you this, though, Frank, I think your question is apt because I've talked to several experts who said, that project was started before the pandemic. And it has a lot of hotel and a lot of retail, both of which, the market does not require as much or really want as much right now. So it's out of sorts in that way. The problem now is that it's about 2/3 of the way done. And it's the point where it would not really be easy to change the design, that fundamental design. So it may come to that, Frank, but I'm not so sure that anybody has put a price on it.
On the line with Jerry Sullivan, National Managing Editor of The Real Deal, the authoritative commercial real estate news source. And while we have the chance, Jerry, since you cover all this on a national scale, that project there in the heart of downtown Los Angeles was to have been a crown jewel of Chinese investment here in the United States, just as the Waldorf Astoria in New York. That was also a Chinese project, an enormous renovation. And now the big news is, you guys are reporting it, they plan to sell that crown jewel of commercial real estate, the Waldorf Astoria in New York. Tell us what we need to know about that.
Well, it's interesting. They just finished the renovation, which went on much longer than anybody thought. It's over in Midtown East. It's a beautiful property. Just finished it, and we'll see. I think this was ultimately in the Anbang insurance meltdown over in China, and they had made big moves with luxury hotels and unwinding all that. So this might be, one of the final pieces left over from that. I will tell you, they got a little head start on the sales, Frank, because the Real Estate Board of New York, it's called REBNY, or referred to as REBNY very often, and they have their big annual gala every year. In fact, a lot of people laughingly call it the Liars Ball. All the real estate big shots go once a year, and this year it was at the Waldorf Astoria. And so they showcased it to the right crowd. If they had a sale in mind, that was just January 22nd. So a well-timed event there for their sales plans.
Very interesting. And looks like a hotel sale was done in Long Beach. Getting back to this area here, closer to home, what do we need to know about that? Was it a Marriott that sold in Long Beach recently?
There's a Westin, which is in the Marriott family. But Westin brand. And really, this one, I have to tell you, it was, I think, came to about $89,000 a room for the Westin, which is right on Ocean Boulevard, not, I think, a block from Pine, about a block from the convention center, right in downtown Long Beach. And $89,000 a room. First, it was about half of what the prior owner paid a few years back. But just generally, I mean, that seems to be a awfully big discount on a Westin 469 room Westin hotel in downtown Long Beach, right next to the convention center. And that Long Beach Convention Center is busy. It's a going concern. So that's very interesting. It looks like a local buyer out of Orange County, Kana Enterprises, was the buyer, and they may have gotten quite a bargain on that one.
Well, just about a minute left here, Jerry. But what's going to happen with ULA? A discussion at LA City Hall about the future of that so-called mansion tax, which has impacted adversely all commercial real estate transactions for the most part here now.
Here's another one, Frank. I mean, Nitya Raman, who is a DSA member, by all accounts a progressive, who was a supporter of ULA, proposed a serious rollback of it, especially as it applies to commercial. And shortly thereafter, announced a run for mayor. I think we have a case of a pretty viable candidate from the left trying to move to the center. I noticed that Raman, Council Member Raman, also today was very supportive of LAPD. Another thing that may rankle her base, but I mentioned they might stick with her and moves her to the center with the rest of the population. So something very interesting going on there.
No question about it, Jerry. Well, we'll stay on it and appreciate your updates. Jerry Sullivan, National Managing Editor of The Real Deal, the authoritative commercial real estate site, on 790 KBC.
The UCLA women's basketball season is one you don't want to miss. Your top 10 Bruins are well on their way to another Final Four run. We need you to get to Pauley to support this incredible team. Led by Lauren Betts, Gabriela Jaquez, and Kiki Rice, newcomers Gianna Neepkins and Charlize Ledger-Walker. This group plays an exciting brand of basketball and wins. The time is now to come to see these stars in action. Big-time matchups are coming. Go to UCLABruins.com/tickets to secure your seats today. Can't wait to see you in Westwood cheering on the Bruins.